This is John Miller with the Hometown Historian channel. As you can see behind me, there is a train station for Annville, Pennsylvania. I wanted to introduce a new series here that we're going to be visiting these old railroad stations. There's two really cool ones down in Lebanon that are both on the National Registry of Historic Places. There's also a really well preserved one there in Palmyra. I think coolly it is preserved as a model railroad store, I believe. So I'd like to visit that at some point and actually go inside when the guy's open and give him a little publicity and just talk about that railroad station, maybe any information he has as well. So anyways, I want to do this new series called America's Rail Stations, because really, if you think about it, back when railroads were starting, they were starting to be invented and started, it was 1820s, 1830s, I guess. And, those rail stations were an avenue to the world. Because a lot of times, you only could go so far in your area with horse and buggy. A lot of people ran farms, so you really couldn't be away a whole lot. And really the communities back then as well, we've talked about in previous videos, I think a bunch of the Country Roads Take Me Home, that a lot of these communities, they had to be self-sufficient. So you had to have every aspect of your living conditions had to be taken care of within your local community. So you had your blacksmiths, you had your saddler, you had your leather workers, you had your general store. Like my great-great-grandfather, Levi Miller, we had done the family history out the Outwood Cemetery there at that, I think it was the Evangelical Lutheran Church. And they're buried there along with my great uncle Frank, who had been the guy that got shot in the back in a saloon in Philadelphia while he was playing piano. My grandpa Milton's buried there. He was, I believe, the 7th of 11 children, I believe it was. It's either that or 9. Off the top of my head, I can't remember everything. I try, but I fail. I'm getting older, so things, as long as I remember to eat and get up and take care of myself, I'm doing okay, I guess. But anyways, these stations, on the particular line that I think a lot of is the line that went through, I believe it went as far as Pottsville. It may have only gone to Tremont, but I think it did go up a little bit further north. But it went to Lebanon. I think it was the Tremont and Lebanon run, and that's sort of what put the Union Canal, that northern branch of the Union Canal, out of business, as well as the flood that had happened, I believe, in 1862. But that rail station was essential. The people were able to go to Lebanon to do their shopping because that was the big town, or go north to Pottsville if it did go the run the whole way up through there. I know my dad and my aunt Ruth used to talk about they would go down to Twin Grove Park, and because that was like an amusement park and really cheap, but they had all the different stops along there, from Greenpoint and Inwood. There are a number of other smattering of villages there. My great-grandpa Levi was at Sudburg Station. He had the Sudburg Motel, and they had a post office there. It was a general store. So all these communities, they sort of had all that within. But the railroad and these rail stations sort of opened to a greater world, a much more vast world. So you're able to go places that you only ever heard about, and relatively cheaply as well. So these were such an integral part to our hometown history, and there aren't a ton of them left. This place here, this is actually the headquarters of a historical society, the Friends of Old Annville. They take care of, like, Annville. Cliff and I did a searching for history video for Annville. We sort of hopped into it without really knowing. I knew a bunch of the names of the different buildings, historical names, different inns and things of that nature. It was like the Abraham Herr mansion or house, without actually knowing what the exact locations or the physical address was. So we were sort of blathering about when we did it. But that's sort of what the Searching for History series was, is you have a few places that you want to identify that you want to go to. This was one of the places, the Quiddy Nature Park, which we're going to go over to next, and just sort of talk about a little bit of history, what we knew of. Because a lot of times stuff isn't readily available on the internet, and then sometimes it can be wrong. Thankfully, I got the Images Across America, which was in part done by this Friends of Old Annville, and then you get that physical history. So you can then go, when I do the Annville video, I can go this address, because one of the inns has a cool story about Martin Van Buren stopping on the way out to Pittsburgh, and just a bunch of different cool aspects of history of these different places, and knowing exactly what these places are is a pretty neat chance to do stuff like that. But this railroad station, for instance, actually was taken down and moved. Somebody bought it and moved it to another location. Friends of Old Annville was able to put the money together to take it apart and bring it back here, and this acts as their headquarters for right now. But Friends of Old Annville is responsible for Quiddy Nature Park. They're responsible for the train station here, but they're also responsible because Annville has that huge, instead of just having like normally the historic registry or the registry of historic places, normally it's like one place, or like we did Swatara Iron Furnace, where it's 80 some acres or whatever that was, that had involved the mansion, the engineer's house, Iron Master's house, those types of things, including the furnace. But this is like actually a whole section of Main Street, and they also have the Beaver House, which is on Oak Street or Route 934 going south from Main Street, and it's a huge area. So they also provide funds for people for the facade, the fronts of the homes, to be able to sort of give some extra money there for homeowners to be able to bring those homes back to their original state and preserve that history. Because I think it was in the middle of the 70s, there was a house right there towards the square that they just tore it down. They didn't preserve any of the stones, anything. This is a house from like late 1700s, early 1800s, and it was just a couple of the residents were like, we can't continue to allow this to happen to our history. And Friends of Old Annville does the good work. They really do. A lot of that stuff sort of gets overlooked because a lot of people, it's not maybe glamorous or whatever, but what they do preserves our history, and our history is a major part of us. And rail stations like this are a major part of our history. And like I said, they're very influential in our communities to allow us to see a much more open and vast world. So we're going to do a series on these called America's Rail Stations. We have one in Palmyra, 2 in Lebanon, and then I'm going to do a lot more research and see what other stations there are. I'm going to quick run around the railroad station. They actually have a cool thing back there too, with a rail car on some tracks. And this is, I believe, I don't think this is the original location. The original location would have actually been further west. But I think when my mom and dad first got married, they actually lived right near where the original rail station was, because they lived on a farmhouse, because my mom had actually worked at Lebanon Valley College for quite a few years, working for, I believe, a vice president of the college. So, they were very familiar with that, and that was their starting of their marriage. It's like that. But I'm going to take you around this place. I'm going to flip the camera around, and then I'll have an audio part of the video that talks a little bit more about the history. There's not going to be a whole lot, but I can get enough from what Friends of Old Annville has. And I'll actually put a link for their website as well, because they really do. They do phenomenal work, and these types of organizations are so essential to our history being preserved. And for what I'm trying to do, where I'm trying to put our history on video with audio, these type of organizations make that possible, because so much of that information otherwise will be lost. And like I said, a lot of times the stuff you find on the internet isn't always right. They make sure what they have is correct. So thank you to Friends of Old Annville. I'm looking forward to this new series, and we'll have a lot of fun with it. Check out these cool old railroad stations, which were such a huge part of our hometown history. So we're going to flip this around. Thanks, everybody. So here we are with the camera flipped around. I like the old signs and stuff like that for the rail station. We'll get back here a little bit further so you can see it. Not a real big building. It's a it's actually much larger than you'd realize once you go inside and stuff like that. But just, I always loved the shape, the colors, because a lot of times they had like the Victorian colors, so they had really unique sort of homey feel to them. The original structure would not have had a basement. This does. I think that's probably for like furnace and things like that. But you can actually, in the back part, you can see the cool chimney up there, because they always had those yellows and tans with the red, and then these sort of Victorian grays and things like that. I always found very, very cool. This historic building, originally dedicated on October 30th, 1891 on Railroad Street, about half a mile west of here, is hereby rededicated to Blanche M. Schaefer and Kathleen Moe, whose vision, hard work, and commitment made possible its return to Annville and restoration on this site in 1998 to 2000. Yeah, both Blanche and Kathleen were very, very important to getting the whole historic society started and preserving so much. And they actually had, I think, they have a video, which I'll probably put a link up for that as well, that they have their own YouTube site and stuff like that, but they did a video on the restoration of this. They actually had, I think there's some Amish guys that came in and did this, and they did a phenomenal job, because, you know, it really is, it's like putting a puzzle together and there's no instructions, and they just did phenomenal work on this. But there's always just beautiful railroad stations, the old woodwork, and some of these places just, they get left to nothing and they go to nothing, and then they're lost forever, and it's a shame. But this is one place that has been preserved, and I thought this would be the great place to start our new series of America's rail stations. And it's cool too, because you're right next to the tracks here and the railroad crossing. But these are what these old rail stations used to look like. Because I think there was an earlier station before this. I think that might have burnt down, if I remember correctly. The video, when I post that'll explain a lot of that. But this would have been the ticket stand here. But this is cool. They put this little thing here with the rail tracks, and then it would have been like a service cart. So that's pretty neat. But yeah, this would have been the old ticket window. You have one of the old potbelly stoves in there, telegraph, the old phone, old typewriter. I love old typewriters. I think they're the coolest thing. Like this type of old phones and phonographs, it's like just the mechanics of so many of those things. But you can see inside there to a degree. And they have one of the old carts there, baggage carts. I always thought it was fun at a Hershey company. They used to have a ton of those old carts that we used to use that were very similar to that. Very industrial, but the old typewriter there. It's a beautiful piece of machinery. Like there was and it's an Underwood too. There's an elegance to them, and it was an art to the way they did things back then. But yeah, it's much colder on this side of the building, I'll say that. It's hopefully this is the last chilly day for a little while again, and then we'll be, and just like the ornamentation of like just the handles and stuff like that, just everything was just done so much more beautifully back then. But so this is the Annville rail station, and yeah, so we will be doing more of these, and at some point we'll have the next one. I'd like to know what the NV stands for, so if anybody knows, go ahead and say, because different things like that had meanings for the railroads and that type of stuff. So, and it's cool, like the bricks, they have different people that gave money to help this happen. But once again, thank you to Friends of Old Annville, and to all those who are involved with restoring this place. This is our very first rail station that we're visited. We'll talk a little bit more about it next in the video here, with some audio work, maybe give a little bit more information about this particular station. But with that, I'll say thank you, and we will see you all about town. So as promised, I do have a little bit more information about this particular railroad station. I believe there were actually probably more because there's one down in Cleona as well. But this particular one, the original one was, I believe, it was chartered 1833 but opened in 1842, which was from Philadelphia to Reading. So it was Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, and then they eventually made the Lebanon Valley rail station or railway. This particular station that we see, I believe, was actually built in the 1890s. Now it operated, it sounds like they started passenger service in 1890s, and then I believe in it was 1969 they officially closed the station. And like I said, it was down maybe say about 6 or 7 blocks down at Railroad Street in Annville, and that would be west. It's just east of Lebanon Valley College is where this station would have originally been. But this is not the original building. The original building, I think, lasted for so long, and then I think there was a fire or something of that nature, which was sort of common with a lot of these different stations. These were very, very important, especially during World War I, World War II, with the disembarking, or the embarking, I should say, of the troops off to the different places, especially like stations like in Lickdale, which was also, I think, known as Jonestown Station, even though it was in Lickdale. That was essential in World War II for moving troops to New York City and those types of places, Philadelphia. So this station was part of, I think it was Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, which I'm not sure if that was part of Pennsylvania Railroad or not. But anyways, this particular station was actually bought in 1969 by a gentleman who moved the station over to New Cumberland and had to use it for like model railroading to house his collection. And then in 1998, he closed that down. Friends of Old Annville got together and was able to buy it and bring it back. And once again, this is over on like Moyer Street. So it is a couple blocks east of the original station. But this is the station from 1890s. So with that, we'll say thank you, and we will see you all about town.